Hey, folks. Andras Jones here.
And Brian Connolly here.
And we've been doing these intros before our podcasts because we record them well in advance. And there's information that comes to light after the recording we want to let you in on. Like some exciting news about... this is the beginning of a new era in our podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Like you've noticed in these intros that they sound nice and crisp and clear, and the rest of the episodes sound like I'm a guest on the phone. That's because I have been a guest on the phone. But now we're in a whole new world of sound where we are using a microphone that Andras mailed to me, and it sounds like I'm kind of sort of in the room with you.
Yeah. It's very exciting. It's very, very exciting, and I hope you enjoy it. If you wish that we went back to the old thing, if you're pining for that old style phone sound, let us know. You may notice a couple of minutes in this next episode where we drop into phone sound, but that's just magic. Don't worry about it. Don't let it distract you.
Not real.
So we're going to get into talking about Bob Roberts, but there's some, I've had a little bit of an adventure with Bob Roberts in the last weekend I wanted to fill you in on. So, Brian, I don't know if you're aware, but Tim Robbins, the creator of Bob Roberts, has a new project out that's available on Patreon, which is a audio series, like an audio play.
Cool.
Called Bobo Supreme. And Bobo Supreme, and when I saw the notice about it on Instagram, I was like, oh, I got to check this out. This sounds like it might be in some way connected to Bob Roberts. Bob Roberts. And I highly recommend checking it out. We'll provide a link in the show notes. And it's basically it's a parody of the current occupant of the White House. And so that's all very interesting. But then I took it a step further and I joined the Patreon campaign and I wrote to them that we were going to be doing an episode about Bob Roberts, and would they potentially like to provide us with an audio ad for it, or maybe even have Tim Robbins answer a few questions for us. And they got back to me right away saying, oh, we'll get right back to you. And then they sent me a thing saying, tonight we're doing a happy hour pre the town halls with Tim Robbins himself, and he'll be answering questions about Bobo Supreme. So I signed up for that, and I got myself in there. And in that talk, Tim Robbins talked about how there was definitely a connection between Bob Roberts and Bobo Supreme.
So where did you come up with the name Bobo Supreme?
So originally I kind of thought, well, I wanted to do a reflection or a kind of a homage to Bob Roberts, this film I directed in 1992. Mm-hmm. But as I was writing it, it just wasn't right, because Bob Roberts, if he was around right now, would be like an elegant, classy statesman compared to Trump. So,
and he also mentioned that Bob Roberts isn't available for streaming anywhere, and he didn't officially invite people to upload the film to Vimeo, but he sort of mused that might be a nice idea if someone took it upon themselves to do it. Sort of a, who will rid me of these meddlesome copyright issues? And so, taking the initiative, I uploaded Bob Roberts to Vimeo, including the extras at the end, and we'll post it on the website, so you can watch the film if you're feeling like, I want to watch the film before I hear you talk about it. Well, now you can. Go to our website and click on the link, and you can watch the film, including the DVD extras at the end, and then you can listen to us talk about it. So that's all really exciting. But basically, after I showed up at the Zoom call, they just stopped responding to me entirely. And so for most of the weekend, I was sending them, I was giving them time, but I was sending them the evolution of the show. And at a certain point, I started to feel like maybe I was like the Giancarlo Esposito character in Bob Roberts, that I was just hassling them and that they were seeing me as some sort of threat. And being treated like that, it gives you a little bit of a sour taste. And so I was like thinking, how am I getting sort of down on this artist and film that I really love? And then a moment of synchronicity changed it all. Are you familiar with a film called VHS? Brian?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's made by Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon's son, and they showed it here at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas.
Well, I stumbled across it and had no idea that Tim Robbins was a part of it or that was their son. And then he showed up in it, and I adored this film. And the fact that Tim Robbins was a producer on it, obviously now it makes sense, it's his son, just turned me back around. It was like, damn it, I just love this guy. I love this guy. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. You want to treat me like dirt. Maybe I am. But I'm a piece of dirt that loves Tim Robbins and loves the movie Bob Roberts. And if you want to enjoy it yourself, you can watch the video on our Vimeo, on our website. And I highly recommend checking out the film VHS. It's the premise is it's a kid taping over his parents' wedding video during the winter of 1987, and I won't explain it more. Just check it out. It's a lot of fun. This is kind of a long intro, but I feel like that was important information to get out. We still have one little bit of business. What's that, Brian?
Yeah, I just want to thank Lorraine Feather, who co-wrote the song Rules Don't Apply, featured in Rules Don't Apply, which was the episode that we had last week. And she actually responded to some of our posts on our Instagram and had really nice things to say about our show and those posts. So I just want to say thank you, Lorraine.
And I'm going to go you one better there, Brian, because Lorraine and I went back and forth on the Instagram, not arguing. That sounds like we were arguing. No, it was a very friendly back and forth about my appreciation for the film and her appreciation for our appreciation. And she made a point of mentioning that she has her own version of the song that you can get to by clicking on the link in the bio on her Instagram page. And since she's all over our Instagram posts about Rules Don't Apply, she should be very easy to find. And in that conversation, I mentioned to her that I've been dreaming of hearing Tom Waits do a version of the song Rules Don't Apply. And so, as my way of saying thank you, Lorraine Feather, I actually recorded my rendition of Rules Don't Apply as sung by, well, the best approximation of Tom Waits I could muster. So I hope you enjoy that, Lorraine. And for the rest of the listeners, I hope you tolerate it.
One day I told my friend I was terribly blue. Was it far too late to do what I dreamed I would do? He thought for a moment, then he answered. He said the rules don't apply to you. He said it very simply and quietly too, as if there wasn't any doubt at all that he knew. He gave me a gift that I would treasure. He said the rules don't apply to you. In the movies we see, in the songs on TV, and in anthems passionately sung, there's a message that you got to keep believing in yourself, but they generally mean if you're young. If it's written on the air as it seems to be, that we haven't long at all to find our destiny, I'll always remember to be grateful that the rules don't apply to me.
Radio 8 Ball,
Lennix here. When I'm not co-hosting The World Is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8-Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8-Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to The World Is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about
Bob Roberts.
No, you don't sound very excited about it. You're like, Bob Roberts. Bob Roberts! And this is The World Is Wrong podcast, where we champion films the world is wrong about. I'm your host, Andras Jones, and
I'm Brian Connolly, the other guy.
you're also a host. You just say that you're the other guy, but we're co-hosts in this endeavor. You can't distance yourself from this like some wily political operative, Brian. But it's appropriate because we're here to talk about the, I don't know, what do you call it? The prophetic, dark comedic satire, which we consider to be a horror film called Bob Roberts. Right?
Yes. Yep.
And why are we talking about this film, Brian?
Oh, well, because it's Halloween time. It's Shocktober. We're here to celebrate horror films. But wait a minute. Is Bob Roberts a horror film?
Well, we're going to explore that. Bob Roberts was my choice for this 1-2 punch of hidden horrors. And why don't we just play a clip from it, and I'll tell you what the film's about.
Here in Philly, it's a brisk 43. That's the news at the top of the hour, and now our own Kelly Noble interviews senatorial candidate Bob
I
Roberts.
must say up front that I am not a fan of your music. I find it offensive. And I'm sorry, but I wouldn't vote for you if my life depended on it. Good morning, Philadelphia. Our guest today is Bob Roberts, Pennsylvania senatorial candidate and folk singer. Our viewers are curious about where it all began. Where did it start for you?
Where did what start?
Well, was it a small colonial home with a mom in a yellow starched dress and a dad in a seersucker suit?
You're speaking of my upbringing.
Yes, your upbringing.
Well, Kelly, I came here to speak about the issues, but I will happily indulge your personality search. I was born and raised lower middle class right outside the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My father was a fry cook, my mother a peacenik. I had no brothers or sisters. Make your judgments if you must.
He was a model student, so full of life and energy. Some of the other kids didn't like him very much. Oh, but I did, very much.
Increasing restlessness and trouble with authority figures and classmates create problems for Bob in high school, and by his senior year, his grades have fallen.
I know what it's like to be without a home. I was homeless when I was 17. Get this straight, Jack. I didn't ramble. I didn't roam. No siree. No box cars or park benches. No panhandling for me. I went straight to work. I earned enough money out of my own to enroll myself in a school of my choice. A school I wanted.
That's not quite true. Bobby enrolled himself in military college by forging my signature on a check of mine.
He was happy there. He said it was because he needed discipline, more structure in his life. He felt we offered too much freedom. And you know what? He was right.
I was trying to instill different values in him than the ones he has now. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, the 60s are, let's face it, a dark stain on American history. At no other time has lawlessness and immorality been so widespread.
You're speaking of Watergate and our invasion of Cambodia.
No, I'm not. I see. I'm speaking of you. I'm speaking of lawlessness and immorality with regard to drug use and sexual practice.
Excuse me?
Disregard in the press for the sacred institutions that have made this country what it is today.
Is social protest disregard for our laws and institutions?
Certainly it is.
And yet it is a guaranteed right in our Constitution.
So is burning the flag. Need I say more?
Yes, you need say more. Or are we to believe that what Bob Roberts wants to see in America is a compliant and silent public which respects the wishes and actions of its presidents, no matter how immoral or illegal?
Are you a communist?
Excuse me?
Self-determination. The choice to be what you want to be. And I wanted to be rich.
Bob Roberts is the first of Tim Robbins' 3 films that he was able to make as a director. It's a fictional documentary of the senatorial campaign of Robert Bob Roberts, a rebel conservative folk-singing Wall Street trader clearly pitched as a Republican who is seeking to unseat a Kennedy-era Democrat played by Gore Vidal. Robbins made the high-integrity choice not to release the soundtrack album for fear the songs might be taken up by people who took songs with lines like, "Be a clean living man with a rope in your hand, drugs stink, hang 'em high for a clean living land," literally. But if the songs had been released, I think people might recognize the genius nature of this film purely as a Dylan-esque parody, with Roberts/Robbins releasing records like The Times They Are A-Changin' Back and releasing videos in the style of Subterranean Homesick Blues. I have huge respect for this choice. It makes the work even better and more dangerous. Bob Roberts is also a very smart and dark political satire of its moment, a time, the mid-90s, when the SNL crisis and Iran-Contra and the drug war and the economic policies of Reagan and Bush and, at that time, Clinton, as well as the first Iraq war, were all very present. All of these are woven into the script and the story of Bob Roberts. And having Gore Vidal, a genuine critic of these policies, playing a character who is being challenged while critiquing the Roberts character in his own words, I'm sure, makes the film a very special time capsule. I've also been rewatching Robert Altman's Tanner 88 and the fact that Tim Robbins had just finished up acting in The Player, many of whose actors end up appearing in Bob Roberts, makes me think that there is some sort of spiritual or creative connection between Robert Altman's series Tanner 88 about another mockumentary about a real-ish but not real senatorial campaign, how that affects Bob Roberts, and we can discuss that when we dig into the film. Now, all this makes it a great movie, and I know it has a lot of fans, so the world isn't actually wrong about Bob Roberts in the sense that people don't know it's good. But for the next 2 episodes, we're going to be looking at films that are horror films that the world doesn't think of as horror films. And Bob Roberts is definitely a horror film. Now, I know when this episode comes out, we're going to be right up next to the election of 2020, and people are going to be losing their/our collective shit, and that's going to make it even scarier to watch this film. All of the political scandals and conspiracy theories about Bob Roberts that are referenced in this film are real and have real lives and bodies and crimes attached to them. When Giancarlo Esposito's Gary Webb-style journalist lays out a path of corruption from Langley to Vietnam to Allende to Iran to the campaign of Bob Roberts, there's more truth than art, and the true part is scarier than anything in Nightmare on Elm Street. To me, at least. For years at horror conventions, when people asked me what my favorite horror film was, I always said Bob Roberts, and it's even scarier now. Some of the scenes, like Bob Roberts appearing on an SNL-style TV show, which were scary in 1996, actually happened in 2016. And spoiler alert, Bob Roberts wins, Gore Vidal loses, and that is fucking terrifying. And that's what this movie's about.
I mean, I guess start with like Tim Robbins making his first feature. This is his first feature that he made. And it's definitely a very bold choice for your first feature. I think he made it maybe thinking he would never be allowed to make another feature again, which is the best way to make any movie. I feel.
Yeah, and Tim Robbins was well known in Los Angeles as one of the founders of the Actors Gang, which was and is a theater company in Los Angeles that is known for doing political theater and still does. So I feel like it's more an extension of the work that he was already doing. And the fact that he had just acted in The Player, which is another really biting satire, I think that it was just a different time. I think, whereas now that might be seen as a career-killing move. I mean, obviously it set him up to make 2 more films, which he was able to make, which were
Oh, Dead Man Walking.
I always want to call it Walking with the Dead, or there's so many dead walking things. Yes. So he went on to do Dead Man Walking and then Cradle Will Rock, both films that had very strong political messages.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, he was married to Susan Sarandon, also very political. I just think that viewers watching this now, one of the things that's so scary about it is that it came true. At the time, it was a parody, and it was at a time when there were, you had all these stars in this film, and you had a lot of backing for this film in the culture. And jumping forward to Cradle Will Rock, the way that Cradle Will Rock ends with this sense of a time of great creativity coming to a close, I feel like that's sort of the uber horror of these 3 films from Tim Robbins, that he's both documenting the end of the 20th century and giving a glimpse of what we have to look forward to in the 21st century. But let's talk about Bob Roberts as a traditional film monster. Like, let's talk about him, compare him to Dracula, Frankenstein, Freddy Krueger, the Wolfman, the Creature from the Black Lagoon, Jason, Mike Myers. And are there any great female well, I guess the mama alien from Alien.
Yep.
So anyway, so let's talk about Bob Roberts in relation, if this is a monster movie, and I think it is. Well, I rather than give you my opinion, what do you think about that? How do you think that that Bob Roberts fits into this tradition of film monsters?
I think probably it's most comparable to Dracula, I would say, because Dracula, unlike most monsters, was able to kind of like seduce people and to sort of cast this spell over them. And you still have these people and you have the people, kind of the outline people who are like, wait a minute, this is terrifying. Don't go to this castle. Don't have dinner with Dracula. But then there's people that are just drawn to him and then hypnotized by him. And they think he's just this great guy. And they become indoctrinated into his lifestyle by being bit on the neck. And now they're also a vampire. And so I feel like maybe the closest I can think of would be Bob Roberts is Dracula.
Interesting.
And like, because like at first when you see Dracula, he seems like he's great. You're like, look at this well-dressed man. Look at this handsome man. He's inviting me for dinner. Isn't this great? He's letting me stay in his castle. Oh, isn't this wonderful? Oh, he's talking about all these nice things. And then you're like, wait a minute. There's something wrong with this guy, but it's too late. I've already been bit on the neck. So even like if any of these characters in Bob Roberts at any point realized that they had gone too far, like if like his fans, if the Bob Roberts fans, like we have Jack Black playing one of his intense fans, if there was any point where he's like, wait a minute, oh wait, this guy's bad, too late. He already cast his spell and has already and you've already fallen for it, and you've convinced your family and friends, and it's already spread like a disease, like vampirism.
I think that's totally a valid comparison, but I'm going to compare him to Frankenstein.
Okay.
Because one of the things that in the story of Bob Roberts, one of the compelling things about him is that he's not the child of right-wingers or white supremacists or capitalists even. He is the child of folky, hippie revolutionaries, which that's also the case of Pete Buttigieg and Kamala Harris, both political entities who are much more conservative, even though they're Democrats, than their radical parents. And something about that, about this nightmare, like, so Dr. Frankenstein creates what he thinks is going to be a boon to humanity. And then that boon to humanity, his child, ends up becoming a monster who tears apart everything that he believed in. And is just sort of is driven by this primal resentment about even being created. And I feel that in Bob Roberts. Like, he is just a profit-making, people-manipulating machine. There's all these great scenes of him fencing, going from fencing to then hopping on his motorcycle. And like, he uses all of these tools. Like, fencing is such an interesting choice because it's both macho and effete. You know, it's like, there's something that seems so wimpy about dressing up in that white costume, white outfit. And then there's one point when he gets beaten and he is such a sore loser. The film does a wonderful job at showing him as a very frightening person and letting you in on these little moments of, you know, absurd weakness. But yeah, so to me, Bob Roberts is more like, well, again, not more like, but when I watch it, I see him more in the sense of Frankenstein, in that sense of like the best of intentions gone horribly awry.
Only you like Frankenstein's monster much more as a human being than you do Bob Roberts.
Well, yeah, let's think about that. Like, is the sympathy we feel for Frankenstein? Let's think about that, because part of obviously the characters who support Bob Roberts in this film, like Jack Black and all of his fans, who seem like early versions of, you know, Trump supporters in a certain way, that they see they have the sympathy for the monster that we're supposed to have for Frankenstein. Like, oh, his horrible hippie revolutionary parents didn't let him use his grandmother's inheritance to invest, and he had to emancipate himself so that he could go to a military school and become who he was meant to be. And people, like, maybe it should make us question the sympathy we have for Frankenstein. Right?
Yeah, well, but with Frankenstein, he didn't ask to be, you know, brought back to life. He was fine being dead.
Yeah, but in Bob Roberts didn't ask to be fed granola and a diet of, you know, social responsibility.
I guess that's true.
He is the monster that he was born to be.
Yeah.
You know, I like that, like, there's this idea that, that every generation rebels against their parents, or
yes.
So like Bob Dylan was rebelling against his parents, and here is Bob Roberts rebelling against his parents. I think that's, if it weren't so terrifying, I think it could be a really hilarious satire of just Bob Dylan, of like a conservative take on Bob Dylan. I think that in a way, Tim Robbins' political integrity made this a greater film, but made it a less, probably a less successful film. Like, if he had been able to release the soundtrack, I think the film would have been much more successful. But I really respect him for not releasing the soundtrack. Like, I think it would have been a terrible move to release the soundtrack and allow it to become successful and become like the Frankenstein monster, the Bob Roberts. It's such a, that's what I'm saying, is there's such a balancing act in this film that Tim Robbins is trying to show us this thing, but not let it get out. Like, who makes a film trying to not let it be more successful? Because he's afraid that this film could be seen as a positive.
Yeah.
Because he's making such a good case for Bob Roberts to the kind of people who would respond to that idea.
Yeah.
And maybe there's embedded in that another horror film from the standpoint of the creator of art. Like,
yeah,
if you know you're building Frankenstein's monster, do you stop? Or do you just like build him with broken legs so that he can smash, but he can't run? Yeah. So, okay. So that's the sort of the monster aspect of it. Let's talk a little bit about just the film making side of it. This is a first film. As I said, he's coming off of The Player. He's got access to so many great actors. Have you seen Tanner 88?
I just watched it last week, and also Tanner on Tanner, not even knowing that you had watched it. I watched it on my own accord.
Wow. So, okay, I'm so excited that you did talk about that.
So we can dig into that too if you want.
Great, because I was actually thinking of including a clip from the Tanner 88 series at the end of this podcast. So, perfect.
Nice. I also saw him in the Rolling Thunder review, that new Scorsese fake doc, or whatever you want to call it, about Bob Dylan. And Tanner shows up in it, which was a surprise. I was watching this anyway, so it's like all these things lining up. And it's like, wait, is he supposed to be Tanner? And he's referred to as just the politician. They don't say Tanner, but it's clearly supposed to be Tanner. And it's just him talking about his memories of seeing the Rolling Thunder review in Niagara Falls. And it's such a fun in-joke, and like it's funny too, because like everybody's reading about or complaining about how this movie's got a lot of made-up stuff in it, and clearly this is Scorsese showing his cards, being like, well, yeah, here's Tanner.
It's funny.
And I liked it.
You call him Tanner, but it's Michael Murphy.
I know, but he's playing Tanner. You know, I believe it. I believe in it so much, too. You know, and it's just funny too, of like tying that with Bob Roberts, being like, here's this Tanner fake politician in a documentary about this kind of, you know, rebellious folk singer, and it kind of ties in with Bob Roberts and being a fake documentary about a rebellious folk singer of a different kind.
Do you see the seeds of Tanner 88 in Bob Roberts?
Oh, definitely. Like, it definitely is this, I feel it's like very much a companion in a way, because Tanner 88 is sort of following this liberal and his problems, and then we're doing the opposite. And I think it was good to see both sides. And also, Bob Roberts much more successful as a politician than Tanner. You know, spoiler alert: Tanner loses. He doesn't become anything. But Bob Roberts succeeds, and as Tanner keeps falling down and picking himself back up, it just sort of ultimately ends to his demise. But then like Bob Roberts just fails up, and no matter what happens, no matter what people dig up on him or anything, he just succeeds and rides higher and higher. And I think they both just hit into hard truths. And in a way, I feel like Tanner 88 and Bob Roberts hits into truths that no political movie really had gone into before, in a way. And it's interesting that they both decided to go in sort of this like kind of darkly comic way of about things.
They also both feature the actress Pamela Reed.
Yep. Pamela Reed's in both.
Did you, so when you were watching Tanner 88 and in the, like, there's a lot of times where the character of Tanner is talking, he's running against Joe Biden and Al Gore, and hearing him talk about Joe Biden and Al Gore in the context of this election season, I guess that's why this, bringing it back to why I think of this as a horror film, is because in real horror films, there's not a chance that it's going to hurt me. But in political horror films, you know that we are the victims of it. In Tanner 88, we're the victims of his loss, and in Bob Roberts, we're the victims of his victory.
And it's interesting. I feel like as time goes on, these movies become more scary and less comedies. Like watching it again, I don't think Bob Roberts is a comedy anymore. I thought it was really funny 25 years ago. I don't think it's funny at all now. It's only scary. And like even Tanner 88, you're just like, this isn't funny. This is just really sad. And it's just interesting how, and like you said, if he had like really leaned into it more, if Tim Robbins was more like, I'm going to make this big comedy that reaches the masses, like it definitely would have been funnier. It would have been more of like it would have been like a type of movie that Barry Levinson maybe would have made or something like that. Like something that's a little more broad and a little more like you throw in a lot more jokes while you're also trying to be biting.
Are you thinking of like Wag the Dog?
Yeah, I was thinking like Wag the Dog, or what was the one where Robin Williams runs for president, Man of the Year? Right? So those movies definitely go more for the comedy. Like it still is got truths in there, and it still is like very satirical, but it's also kind of in the end an enjoyable movie. Like Wag the Dog in the end is like, oh, that was enjoyable, that was fun, in the way that like a Dr. Strangelove is fun. But I think this is not Dr. Strangelove. This is more fail-safe with some jokes, but now the jokes are not funny. Like what seemed ridiculous in 1992 and absurd, and at the time I think a lot of us thought that when we saw this movie, because it's happened tenfold since then, it's no longer funny, and it's no longer sci-fi. It's no longer satire. It is just painful truth. And so it's kind of, I think it's actually kind of hard to watch this movie now. Like I was being like, oh, Bob Roberts, this is going to be a great time. I love this movie. And then watching again, I was like, this is painful to sit through right now. It's hard to watch this movie in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. So this film came out on September 4th, 1992. So it came out in the lead up to Clinton's election, in the same way that Tanner was sort of released in the middle of a political campaign in 88. So it's I'm trying to think, like a film like this. Well, let's talk a little bit about Gore Vidal, because people who don't know Gore Vidal, well, you should. He is an important historical figure. He was an incredibly prolific author, playwright, a participant in cinema with films like The Best Man, and he was also a very important critic of power. And so for Tim Robbins to have Gore Vidal in this role, I guess, if it was a conservative film, someone like William F. Buckley would be his analog. But he brings an authority and a sadness and a weight to this whole film that I can't imagine even the most esteemed actor. I don't know if Henry Fonda was, I think Henry Fonda was gone by then, but someone like that just couldn't, even someone who had that sort of screen and moral authority could not do what having Gore Vidal in this film does. Are you familiar with Vidal at all?
With Gore Vidal? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So for you, having him there, did that, like, I'm pretty sure those are all, when he's talking, he's not saying Tim Robbins lines. Tim Robbins said, we're going to have you do a monologue critiquing this character, be Gore Vidal. And
I was quite disturbed during our famous debate, if it could be called that. A series of photo opportunities is perhaps more precise. I get vibrations from Mr. Bob Roberts of a very disturbing sort. I haven't any idea who he is. I haven't any idea what he's like. I don't think I'm supposed to have any idea. I know that he proved to be a master of pushing racist buttons and sexist buttons, this and that. The politics of emotion. He's very good at that. What's behind it? I don't see anybody at home. But I will say that once or twice in the course of our debate, I detected a slight whiff of sulfur in the air.
Yeah, it definitely adds like a legitimacy to the whole movie, and it makes the character all the more sad to watch him get beaten down because it's Gore Vidal. Where you're like, leave Gore Vidal alone. Like all he's ever done was stand up for what he believes in, and like now you're gonna pretend that he's a child molester and he's like all these things, all this muck that they rake him through in the movie. It's really, it makes it even more hard to watch as opposed to if it was just an actor, you know. It really feels like leave Gore Vidal alone. Like what did he do to you, Tim Robbins? What did he do to you people?
And at the same time, this is a guy who has fought for losing causes his whole life. So yeah, it's sort of like we're used to seeing Gore Vidal be right and lose. And so we see that again here. And,
yeah,
you know, Gore Vidal was equally as critical of the, you know, the governing style and the policies of neoliberals like Clinton as he was of neo-fascists like Bush. And that's, so to have him playing one of these old school Democrats who there's just no room for him anymore, being squeezed out by both sides at a time when that was really happening in 92, like being an anti-war Democrat made you weak because you were being outflanked not only by Republicans, but by pro-war Democrats. And so again, I think one of the things about, maybe it's just about anything, any topic, when there's a film about a topic that you know and you feel like the film rewards your knowledge as opposed to insults your knowledge. So like, I know if you're a cop and you're watching a movie about cops and you're like, no cop would ever do that, and you're out of it. But then you watch a movie about cops and you're like, yeah, they actually got that right. I'm not a cop. I'm a political junkie. So when I watch a film like this and Giancarlo Esposito starts rattling off all of these conspiracy theories that are attached to the Bob Roberts character.
In order to understand who Bob Roberts is, you have to understand who Lucas Hart III is. Lucas Hart is a spook, one of the Langley crowd new guard. Hart has been living in the shadows for years. He was a lieutenant, Vietnam, Special Forces, worked on the infamous Phoenix program, transferred to South American operations, helped overthrow Allende, messed around in Central America, he probably popped a couple of heads, boom, boom. Set up an organization called Broken Dove, which supplied transport planes to U.S. government operatives. Got his hands real dirty in Iran-Contra, but the Senate washed him clean.
I can't recall, sir.
You can't recall. I see.
Did you or your organization, Broken Dove, have anything at all to do with a transport plane that was downed in Nicaragua on May 23rd, 1987?
The plane was contracted to fly humanitarian supplies into impoverished regions in southern Honduras. Broken Dove is a private relief corporation.
So you had no knowledge of the guns that were on that plane?
No, sir.
But the three men were all close business associates of yours?
Rest their souls, yes. They were patriots acting on their own volition, their own beliefs.
Can you sum up these beliefs for us?
That the U.S. Congress was restricting the growth and safeguard of democracy in Central America. That the actions of these men, although against the Boland Amendment, were nevertheless on the side of goodness and decency.
I have a copy of an FBI report regarding traces of cocaine found on one of the transport
Mr. Chairman,
planes.
this is sensitive material that should be dealt with in closed session.
Get an agreement on
this
this.
This is not an investigation. This is just another example of the depths to which the U.S. Congress is prepared to sink. This is a travesty.
But the charges against Broken Dove were found to be groundless, and the organization was completely exonerated.
The whole investigation was a sham. They discovered a secret government of liars and drug smugglers didn't do a thing about it. Slap these traitors on the wrist. Big deal. Story died in the major press. It's idiots like me who keep investigating who find out just how deep it goes. I am meeting with a contact later who claims to have evidence that connects Broken Dove to a failed savings and loan. Can you believe it? This could be big. I gotta go.
I cannot believe the lies and innuendo that you have been the victim of. It is clear that you had no involvement with this escapade and that we are wasting your time. I am sorry.
Everything he's talking about, they're not making up scandals. They're talking. It's actually it's funny because Orson Welles shows up as a character in Cradle Will Rock, and there is something very Wellesian about this, a first film about a political villain, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is full of real stuff mixed with the fake stuff. So it has this sort of War of the Worlds and Citizen Kane. Plus Tim Robbins is the founder of a theatrical company that he's making a film with. And that's also very Orson Welles. And, you know, unlike Orson Welles, he got to make 2 more films his own way afterwards. So it's all, there's a certain, I guess in that sense, there's a certain amount of momentary triumph. But then there's also the awareness that after the 90s, Tim Robbins never got to make another film, even though the 3 films he made, it's very hard to say anything bad about. They're all excellent. And it makes you think that, again, that this is a scarier world than even we know.
Yeah, it's and it's funny watching this with my wife. We were like, you know what? Honestly, in 2020, I would vote for Bob Roberts over the other people that we have right now. Like, that's how much scarier time has gone on. Is it like now Bob Roberts doesn't seem as bad compared to the people that have in real life followed him?
Statements like that is one of the things that terrify me. It's like
exactly.
Yeah, I mean I wouldn't say that. I'm still voting for Gore Vidal even though he's dead. Yeah, that is one of the scary things. So let's talk about the other scary villains in this film. So you mentioned Jack Black. This is the first time I remember seeing him, and it's such an intense and weird performance.
He's amazing. He's a poet and a genius.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's very un-Jack Black.
Yeah, it's a terrifying role because, like, well, at first it's startling to see him so young, and then to see him with like a buzz cut, you know, and like I'm used to seeing more like Tenacious D, long-haired, unshaven Jack Black. So to see him kind of look more Hitler Youth-like is already startling, and just the intensity he brings to his role is great. And like people kind of, when that movie Bernie came out, we're like, oh, finally Jack Black is a great actor. It's like, no, he's always been a good actor. This is like before we knew who he was, and he's amazing and terrifying in this movie. And all the way up to the end, I don't want to give the end away, but like in that end part with him, the last scene with him, it's so scary. He's so believable in this role. Yeah, I think he doesn't get enough credit. I think the world is wrong about Jack Black in this movie. Like, people should be talking more about how amazing he is in this as an actor.
Yeah, as far as a first, like an introduction to cinema, and he shows up again in Dead Man Walking, and again he's in that he has long hair, but he's also in that one he's also playing a dramatic sort of it's a more of a sad dramatic role. But it's funny to think that Jack Black was on film a lot before we ever knew that he was funny.
Yeah.
He did not bust in as a comedic. It seems like usually comedians bust in as comedic actors and then become, like, they get a chance to do serious work and then they become serious actors. But it's rare that you see, like, it's like if Robin Williams had appeared first in very serious roles, and then we're like, oh, by the way, he's really funny. This is actually his third appearance. He was in an episode of The Fall Guy and Our Shining in 1984. Wow, as a very young kid. And then he's not in a movie again until 1991. Is a TV movie of Our Shining Moment, and then he's in Bob Roberts in 92. So that's really when he first shows up. And then I'm trying to see when, like, he was in a pilot for Waterworld. He's just in a lot of things. Maybe The Cable Guy. That's when he first starts to show up as a comedian, and then Mr. Show happens, and then he's a comedy guy. So in 95, 96, Jack Black starts to become known as a comedic actor. But if you look at his credits, he's in probably 20 films or TV shows before that, playing mostly serious characters that maybe, like I remember he was in an episode of The X-Files where he was sort of a stoner dude. So it's kind of like he's in some ways maybe a little bit of comedic relief, but not funny, not the Tenacious D guy, not the what was that great pilot he did? Heat Vision and Jack.
Oh,
I think that's where I first really got a sense of how great he was. Yeah, I mean, even in 1999, he's in Jesus' Son, again, also in a more serious role. In Enemy of the State, he's in a more serious role. It's such an interesting career track that this guy has had. Bravo to Jack Black. It's like, I think it's sort of sad to think that he's had more, that he's had a better career in the 21st century than Tim Robbins, who made those films and introduced us to Jack Black. But it's hard. I'm still glad we have Jack Black. So let's talk about what are some of the other performances that really jumped out to you in this film?
I really loved Ray Wise in it, who people would know as the Laura Palmer's dad from Twin Peaks. He plays one of the, I guess the head of the campaign, one of the people who runs the campaign for Bob Roberts. And he's the one who's always sort of telling the camera to turn away. Be like, you don't need to film this. You don't need to film this. Like, keep going. Like, you can film, there's something else to film. And he's always trying to politely, like, through clenched teeth in a way, like he's forcing, like, it's hard for him to pretend to be nice, but the whole time he has to pretend to be, oh, everything's fine. I'm great. No, let's film this instead. We don't need to see what you're doing over here. And he's just so good at being this kind of one of these manipulators of the truth and of what Bob Roberts is up to. And I think he's really, really good and really scary. And of course, you have him with Alan Rickman, who's also terrifying.
Yeah,
and great.
Alan Rickman I think he's the whatever. It's like to continue the Frankenstein analogy, it's more actually, let's take it out of Frankenstein into King Kong. Alan Rickman is like the guy who brings King Kong to America. He's the guy who says, oh, this monster is going to be huge and I can make him work for me.
Yeah.
And he plays sort of a deep state CIA sort of like maybe like a Gordon Liddy type, or just one of those Bay of Pigs guys that they talk about in JFK and Nixon. And well cast.
And he has these amazing sunglasses the whole time that make him look even more sinister. We can't really see what's going on with him or what his actual emotions are.
He's a special ops guy, and so he just looks sort of monstrous and frightening. And let's talk about the one of the things that is so, again, it seemed outlandish at the time, but then it actually happened in 2016 when Bob Roberts is booked to be on the Cutting Edge comedy show, which is basically SNL, and they have Bob Balaban playing a Lorne Michaels type character, and John Cusack as the host of the show, who is very political, much more, sort of more like Tim Robbins in real life.
Yeah.
And then, and what happens when this sort of cutting edge comedy show that is seen as liberal or progressive ends up getting in bed with this deeply conservative figure and building a show around him that helps him then win an election. And this happened in 2016 with SNL and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
with him actually dancing on, dancing and like making him look softer and nicer, and watching. So for you watching it, when you watched that play out, did you have any thoughts about that? Did it strike you as being prophetic?
Yeah. And I think this whole segment, this is my favorite part of this whole movie. Like the whole SNL bit, like there's from the beginning to end is such a good chunk of this movie. And it's like, and it says a lot. Like I really like that you have like, you have the one lady who's working for the Balaban who's just totally against all of this. And you have the host who's against it, and yet they're still going to go forward with the show. And what happens is exactly what the people who were against it feared, is he turns it into this agenda. Like he changes, like on air, Bob Roberts changes the song. He's going to do a song about smoking, I think, like an anti-smoking joke song or something. And then at the end, while they're filming live, he changes it to a more political song. And my favorite part of the whole movie is when the lady who works for Balaban freaks out, like basically says she quits, runs backstage, pulls all the plugs out on the live show. And he just wished someone had the guts to do that in real life. Like whenever one of these live shows would kind of give more political airtime for these people when they shouldn't, that someone had the guts to do that. Be like, fuck it, I'm pulling the plug live. I don't care about my job. And it's so, that part is so powerful. That part is so good. And what's funny is that in real life, Bob Roberts was also on SNL a month after the movie came out. And if you watch have you seen that skit?
No, I
where
haven't.
Bob Roberts shows. So it's just it's a really weird skit, and the audience doesn't know how to react to it. And in a way, I think this is sort of why maybe Tim Robbins didn't want to put the soundtrack out. Is it's Bob Roberts at a campfire. He's sitting next to Chris Farley and Julia Sweeney, and they're just singing Bob Roberts type songs, which have like this secret racism to it and all this hatred. And they're lighting this campfire with books. So they're like, throw another James Joyce on there. That'll burn for a while. That'll be great. And it's really funny and it's really dark, and the audience has no idea how to react to it because there's no laughter. They're just kind of like, what the fuck is this? And it feels like, out of context, it feels kind of mean and awful and racist, and you don't really understand the satire of it. And so that was, I thought, interesting that he would make fun of SNL and then a month later be on SNL as Bob Roberts. Maybe that was part of the deal of like, Lauren, I'm going to make fun of you, but then you got to let me on your show. And like, what does Lorne Michaels get out of it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I trying to get in the mind of, I'd love to, being John Malkovich, Lorne Michaels, just like spend a day in Lorne Michaels' brain, because it's just, I can't even relate. Sometimes I'm a fan, sometimes I am not. But I think one of the other things about that, and this is sort of the dark, frightening thing about it that's real, is you have a sense that Lorne Michaels, even though he's this very powerful figure in the realm of SNL, that he ultimately has to take his orders from the network, and the network wants Bob Roberts on, like the network wants Donald Trump on. And, like that thing where the guy from, I think it was maybe from NBC, who came out and said, yeah, Donald Trump is bad for America, but he's good for NBC. He's good for ratings. And you have these people in this film who are trying to stand up to him. You have that the woman who works for the SNL, the producer who tries to shut it down, and you have David Strathairn as an attorney working for the Giancarlo Esposito character, who is trying to tell the truth about Bob Roberts and the Alan Rickman character, and being shut out, and then ultimately being set up as a potential, patsy assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald type. So you see all these people who are fighting back, but you see the huge power that's arrayed against them. Like the way that Gore Vidal's character, the sex scandal around him, he's very clear about saying, like, he makes a very good case. Like, the picture is of my granddaughter and her friend, and I was driving them someplace. But then you see how the news keeps repeating, oh, he's plagued by sex scandals, instead of like just debunking the sex scandal. Again, there's a sense of like the fix is in. And again, that's what's so, I think, probably watching it now on the cusp of an election where there's people who play these dirty tricks actually playing them in real time in front of us, that it makes it that much scarier. You may want to wait until after the election to watch this film.
I think so. I think, or wait another 4 years, depending. But like, I think it's, I think that was the hard thing with watching this and with watching Tanner 88, as like, I didn't really enjoy either of them, even though I should have, because right now is not the time maybe to watch these dark political comedies. I don't know, because they're not funny right now. It just is like, I think the political world and the world in general right now is so dark, and we are the Davis Strathairns, and we're the people being like, we know the right thing, we know the thing, but then like the fix is already in, and we're kind of just riding this wave, and we just want it to end, and we're stuck in this madness. And a movie like this just makes it, maybe it doesn't mend the wound. It might just open it up and rub some salt in it in a way right now. It's hard. Yeah, it's really hard. Like, it'd be interesting to be like, look at like political comedies, like dark ones like this. And can people handle them more when times are a certain way? Or is there never a good time to watch a movie like this and you should just jump in the fire and do it?
Yeah, well, maybe this is like, I've been clear on this show. I don't really watch horror films, but the part of me that has that impulse to want to watch something that frightens me makes me want to watch. Like, obviously, I picked this. We both chose to watch Tanner 88 this week. There's something in us that is drawn to the horror of political satires at this time.
Yeah.
I also wanted to point out, I'm just looking at the cast list here. So there's a ton of really great cameos, and most of them you can pick out when you see it. Like, you see James Spader, and you know it's James Spader.
Yeah.
You see Peter Gallagher, you know it's Peter Gallagher. But there were a few pretty unique early and late appearances. Strangely, Robert Hayes, who played Epstein in Welcome Back, Kotter, is in this movie. I don't remember seeing him. He plays a character named Ernesto Galliano. A very young Jeremy Piven plays a candle seller.
Yep.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, cool. And not that anyone would know it, but there's a woman named Michelle Nagy who plays a pageant contestant. And she's a songwriter who I met when I was playing in Philadelphia many, many years ago and had a big crush on. So good for you, Michelle.
And those keeping track at home, this is now the second appearance of a John Cusack in The World Is Wrong. So we haven't figured out yet how many appearances till you get in the Hall of Fame, The World Is Wrong Hall of Fame. But Cusack's now at 2, and Ned Bellamy now at 2. The guy who played the dentist in Ed Wood, who was in The Paperboy as well with John Cusack, is in this as one of the fake SNL actors. So now Ned Bellamy, 2 episodes of our show he's been appeared in.
Well, there you go. Well, we're building our World Is Wrong cast list. And you know, and before we wrap this up, we should just, I've mentioned him several times, but he really is a driver of the film in a lot of ways, is Giancarlo Esposito.
Yeah.
And obviously one of the great American actors, certainly has worked constantly since then. And, you know, I'm looking at his film, 185 film and TV credits. The guy just... People know that he's a good guy to hire. He's really, really good. But in this, he's playing this Gary Webb style muckraking journalist who pays the ultimate price for seeking out the truth. Do you have any thoughts about him before we close this out?
I love him. I think he is a tried and true actor. Like, he's one of the best actors we have. Like, I just finished watching Homicide: Life on the Street, and he's amazing in that. And here, it's just like, he is sort of like, he is the heart of this movie, I feel. Like, he is, like, without him in this movie, you wouldn't have as many feelings, I think. Maybe it would be more of a dark comedy that's less upsetting, but what he goes through and what happens to him ultimately is really the kind of the knife twist in the gut of this film. Like, and because he's such a good emotive actor, and he's very believable in this role, like he is in everything, it's just like he just adds so much more emotion to everything that happened. Like, you could have easily had somebody run around in this movie and just kind of spout conspiracy things or try to, to try to get to the truth of Bob Roberts, and it could have been more funny, or it could have been more whatever. But he just brings so much emotion to it, and it feels so genuine, his character and his moments. And I think that's what makes the movie more upsetting, is like having him in there and what he brings to it.
Yeah, the combination of his character and Gore Vidal, I think I feel like they're the ones in the movie. Actually, there's a lot of characters in the movie who recognize the stakes of this. I think that's maybe part of it, is that because the Giancarlo Esposito character, because all of the things he's saying are true and could be said about real politicians, not just Bob Roberts. Same thing with Gore Vidal. That I think that's part of what gives the film this like really this weight. That, like I said, it's not fun. Like, it's not funny because it's real, but the fact that it's real makes the satire bite. The way in a way that I'm sure when Gore Vidal read this, I don't know what his response would have been, but I can see why he said yes, that this was coming from someone that the film is as aligned with reality as Gore Vidal is, and Gore Vidal as someone who straddled that line of fictionalizing history while also commenting on history and telling more truth about it, even though he was fictionalizing it. I feel like there is this very strong connection between Bob Roberts, Gore Vidal, like I said, Tanner 88 and Robert Altman and Gary Trudeau's work in that. And it makes it one of the, I've definitely, even though it's frightening to watch, I think it's an important watch. And, if you can watch Freddy Krueger tear up a bunch of kids and cheer it on, I think you can watch Bob Roberts and look at the terror of our reality. And so I hope this episode has encouraged you to check that out. And like I said, I did a deep dive on this. I went back and watched all 3 of his films. I think if you take the 3 of Tim Robbins' films together, it really, even though he only got to make 3 films, it's a real powerful statement, because you've got this one film about sort of the death of the old school liberals, I guess. And then you have a film about just modern life and like the terrible things that happen to normal people, whether it's people being murdered by someone like the Sean Penn character in Dead Man Walking, who was raised in the terrible situations that come from the political decisions made by these leaders. And then you have the final film, Cradle Will Rock, which is about the end of another progressive, like the end of the beginning of that time that created the Gore Vidals and that post-war era, which seemed very optimistic, but then was shut down through conservative attacks from McCarthyites and anti-communists. And so it's rare that a filmmaker has been allowed to make 3 such political films at such a high level with so many movie stars and such big budgets. And so while it's easy to feel bad that Tim Robbins didn't get to make more films. The fact that he got to make 3 great, honest films at the end of the 20th century is a real blessing for those of us who want more of that kind of movie. So I recommend checking out all 3 of them.
Great.
Okay, well, that's Bob Roberts, a scary movie.
Was that your Count Floyd?
Yeah, it takes a lot out of me to do that.
One dream, one wish, one piece of mind. A podcast hosted by Nico White about One Piece by Ichiro Oda on Paper House Network. We'll see you every Monday.
So, okay, well, we can. I'll tell you where we can find Brian. You can find Brian watching hours and hours and hours of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. How many hours of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now have you watched for the Director's Wall episode on Apocalypse Now?
Well, so far I'm clocking in at 10 hours, and I got another 6 to go. So I'm in the shit. I'm in the thick of it. So I'm going to come out alive. I'm going up that river. I haven't met Kurtz yet, but when I do, we're going to see if I still have my sanity. I'm excited.
So we're, of course, talking about your podcast, The Director's Wall, that you do with AJ Gonzalez, where you explore a filmmaker's entire filmography. Your first season was about M. Night Shyamalan.
Yep.
Your current season is about Francis Ford Coppola. And even though by the time this comes out, you'll be well into, I guess, maybe the late 80s of Coppola's career.
I think that's right. I think last
week when we're recording this.
Yeah, my guess is we're getting into Tucker Man in His Dream. I think that's my guess is where we'll be in October. I could be wrong.
Excellent. 1988.
Yeah.
So that's. I highly recommend people check out The Director's Wall. I'm a huge fan.
All right, and then we can find Andras on the Radio 8 Ball show. I was recently a guest on it, and the newest episode that you did answers, you bring on Ian Moore, who was the answer to the question I asked. I asked, can you answer a question with a song without words? And Ian Moore's song Caroline popped up, and there was a lot of interesting synchronicities and things that went on with that. And I'm excited to hear that and see what answers you guys came up with. And heard you talk more about Steve McQueen, as if we can't get enough of talking about that guy.
Yeah, well, I'll unpack the synchronicity here just briefly, because in our episode on The Hunter, I mentioned that I had gone back and watched several other Steve McQueen films, like Hell is for Heroes, and I mentioned Baby the Rain Must Fall, but I hadn't put together the weird synchronicity of that goes with our episode of Radio 8 Ball, because when you were on Radio 8 Ball, you went from talking about Damian Lewis playing Steve McQueen in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to talking about Henry Thomas reprising the Jack Nicholson role from The Shining in Dr. Sleep.
Yeah.
And then later that night, I realized that, or actually later that week, I realized that in the movie Baby the Rain Must Fall, Steve McQueen's character is named Henry Thomas. And we're like, okay, well, that's pretty weird. And then when we had Ian Moore on the show, he was talking about how the song Caroline, which answered your question, was inspired by the Beach Boys song Caroline No from the Pet Sounds record. And then when I was looking at the Wikipedia on Baby the Rain Must Fall, I saw that 2 members of the Wrecking Crew, who were the Los Angeles session musicians who played on the Beach Boys, a lot of the Beach Boys records, including Pet Sounds and Caroline No, were in the band, the rockabilly band that Steve McQueen has in the movie Baby the Rain Must Fall. The drummer is Hal Blaine, and the bass player is Glenn Campbell. And Glenn Campbell actually played with the Beach Boys in 1965 because Brian Wilson was staying home writing the record Pet Sounds, which it keeps going further, that in the movie Baby the Rain Must Fall, the song Baby the Rain Must Fall is sung by a singer named Billy Strange, who actually played on and sang on the record Pet Sounds. And there's still more. There's still more. This is the synchronicity we get to into on the show. Glenn Campbell, when I went to look him up, Glenn Campbell sadly passed away on August 8th. That was the date of his death. That's also Ian Moore's birthday and the date of the Manson murders, which is what started this all in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Steve McQueen, Damian Lewis playing Steve McQueen, talking about Sharon Tate and all of this.
And wait, did we talk about that? We talked about that time on the Paperboy too, because your birthday was soon after August 8th, and we're like, this is all tying together.
So, yes, so there's a lot of synchronicity to explore there. I'm trying to figure out a way to maybe connect Radio 8 Ball with our show, because I feel like there's going to be synchronicities between Radio 8 Ball and The World Is Wrong, and the way to follow them is to listen to both of them.
There you go.
So that's what we're doing. We should also let you know that by the time this comes out, you will be able to get T-shirts of The World Is Wrong for The World Is Wrong podcast with our logo on it. We're going to make them as cheap as we possibly can, because we really want you to wear them on your bodies more than that we are going to profit off of them. We'll profit the most by you wearing them around and having people find out about the show. And another way you can help people find out about the show is please leave us good reviews and ratings at Apple Podcasts, so people will find us. And of course, we invite you to share your criticisms, your suggestions, your ideas, your insights, whatever you want with us through our email at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com. And did I miss anything?
No,
Brian?
I think this is good.
What's the next film that we're going to be covering?
Ooh, so another scary movie. We'll be doing The Rules of Attraction for our next episode.
Ooh, it's a whole other brand of terrifying.
I'm pumped.
Sorry to do this to you people. Bob Roberts and Rules of Attraction. But it's that time of year for being frightened. So get scared. And until next time, just remember, people, the world is wrong, and it's probably wrong about you.
You know, TJ, just before you called me last spring, Lexi and I went down to the Democratic Leadership Conference in South Carolina. Well, last night we were sitting around with Kirk O'Donnell and Hart, Biden, a couple of the other candidates. We were shooting the breeze about how much the party had changed since the 60s. And suddenly, out of the blue, Lexi turned to Hart and she asked him who his favorite Beatle was. Now, at first, Hart laughed, and then he stumbled around trying to remember a name. Then she repeated her question for Biden, and Biden said, well, he'd never been a Beatles fan. He was into jazz. And Dukakis answered Paul, because he liked his wife or something. Now, I don't know if Lexi knows the names of all the Beatles herself, let alone the answer to her own question. But it suddenly dawned on me that I sure as hell did. And I knew for sure that anybody who didn't had absolutely no claim to generational leadership. Now, I must have, 10 years on Joe Biden. But damn it, he wasn't paying attention back then, and I was. And one of the things I figured out very early on was the singer mattered as much as the song. That ideas were only as valuable as the people who got behind them. I mean, people that wouldn't settle. People unafraid of honest inquiry. People who didn't mind asking the impertinent question. God, the impertinent question. Where the hell would we be without it? It's the glory and the engine of all human experience. Copernicus asked it. Shook the foundations of his world. Darwin asked it. He's repudiated to this day. Thomas Jefferson asked it. So, invigorated by it, he declared it to be an inalienable right. I'm not smart enough to know all the answers. But I do know we've got to keep asking the questions. That's what the American experiment is all about. It's at the very core of our character as a people. We owe our vigor to its constant renewal. You know, I don't have much patience for these guys who go around saying the pride is back in America. For some of us, it never left. Vietnam may have covered some patriots in shame, but not this one. We got in there for moral reasons, and by God, we got out of there for moral reasons. Where else on this earth does such debate center on anything other than expediency? Only in America. Watergate, triumph of the system. How could anybody watch Barbara Jordan thunder away at those House hearings and not feel a surge of pride in the miracle of this country? Now, there are those people who tell you that our noisy dissent, our raucous squabble, weakened us as a country, caused us to lose our supremacy. Don't you believe it? We are the envy of this world. Why? Because throughout our history, we have always maintained that we could do better. We've insisted that we could do better. We've always been willing to reinvent ourselves for the common good. And in our darkest hour, leaders, real leaders, have always stepped forward to hold the American people to the responsibility of citizenship. Well, it's time for that kind of leadership now, TJ. I'm not sure that it's me, but I'd like the chance to find out. Oh, and if you young people are still wondering, the right answer is John Lennon.
Did you get it?
I got it.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.